Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 12 of 100 Days of Magic. I am your host, Donna Woodwell. I am the proprietor of this crossroads space, the crossroads of magic and mastery, and I am the owner and headmistress of the School of Magic and Mastery, creating this world to give you everything that you need to have to create your own magical practice and live the life you have always wanted to create. By that I mean, what you can imagine, you can at least move toward that direction. Now, in life, we can't have everything, but we can have many things that we don't dream of if we are willing to get out of our own ways. That's why it's the School of Magic and Mastery. The magic part is learning how to work with the abstract levels of reality and pull down the pattern of things that you want to manifest in your world. The mastery part is learning how to deal with the noise that your own mind makes and get out of your way. Both of those things are required to live the kind of life you want to live. So we, in our 100 Days of Magic series, are learning how to move in this direction step by step, 15 minutes at a time, because ultimately, living a magical life is all about building a habit that supports you living a magical life. So thank you all who are tuning in. Hello, Boris. Thank you for tuning in. You were always here first, and I'm always very grateful for your presence. Today, we are going to talk about black magic versus white magic. This is a great topic, loaded with all the things to summarize some of the issues that we have been talking about. If you go and look up online, what's the difference between black magic and white magic, you're going to find a lot of assumptions, starting with the utterly crazy but understandable given the level of education of people in the world, that white magic is for white people and black magic is for black people. So let's assume that that's like a extreme misnomer of people in popular culture who know nothing about magic whatsoever, and take that one off of the equation, because that's quite frankly not only silly, it is intolerant, and dare I, it's not PC anymore to say stupid, but there are sometimes that it's just stupid and we need to move on. So the second way people often categorize the difference between white magic and black magic is that somehow white magic is good and black magic is evil. I can understand that. That has been a definition of white and black magic that has been around since the Renaissance. When most of our concepts about magic today were built during the Renaissance, which not just brought about the reemergence of all kinds of classical culture, it formed the nucleus of what became the Western magical tradition. Not that things in the West weren't older than that, they were a lot older than that. But the books that we have, the way our spells are written, most of it can trace its ancestry back to the popularization that was happening in the intellectual circles during the Renaissance. This is when Marsilio Ficino and Agrippa and John Dee and the rest of them were writing their books. And even if those who are writing modern Wicca books today have no idea who those people are, they owe an incredible debt to the fact that they preserved in writing a lot of what we rely on today, because books disappear. They disintegrate. It's just physics and biology. They just disintegrate. And if someone hadn't started recopying ideas at that point in time in history, we'd have had nothing left. We would have had a lot of archaeological evidence, which anyone who studies these things know is not the same. Digging up a pot and trying to figure out what it means is a lot different than reading a text and trying to figure out what it means. So, be that as it may, the concept of white and black magic came back into popularity at the time because of the interaction that was going on between the Catholic Church and the people who were wanting to study more occult traditions that they were digging up out of the classical documents and ideas that had been preserved through the centuries. And so the idea of white magic, sometimes called natural magic, is that it was okay and fit into a Christian perspective, whereas black magic was somehow drawing on demons and therefore inappropriate to be working with, considering you were a Christian. So you can hear the good versus evil side to this equation, which of course, anytime a culture resorts to good versus evil, you end up having to recognize that what we often define as good is our way of doing things, and what we define as evil is those other people's way of doing things. That's how the process of demonization happens. When you don't agree with someone, you feel like you have no common ground, and you push them away, and you assign all kinds of derogatory and negative connotations to what they're doing. That's the process of demonizing, and they get the tag evil. That doesn't mean that good and evil don't form a useful tool for exploring things. But it does mean often is the case that we have to deal with our ego's perception and its desire to put itself in a primary position. We all think we are the sign of good. We all individually think we are the heroes of our own story, because we are. It's very difficult for people to think of themselves as the villain, no matter what their perspective is. And consider this when you have conversations with people you do not agree with. They think they are doing good, and they are the heroes of their story, regardless of what you think about them. And that is one of those topics that, as we learn to master ourselves, we have to learn how to work with. Okay? So, other definitions of white magic and black magic. White magic is magic that you do purely for the benefit of other people, and black magic is the magic you do only for selfish purposes. Sometimes this gets assigned to the right-hand path for white magic and the left-hand path for black magic. Yet again, really complicated, messy things once you get down into the weeds, because our egos like to think, again, we are doing the right thing for all concerned. But is that really true? I'm sure I can think of things that seem like they are for the good of all, which may not be for the good of all. They might be much more about my own projections about what's necessary. Second of all, is it bad for you to do things that improve your ability to fulfill your soul purpose in life? Is it bad to want to use magic so that you have the food that you need, and you have the shelter that you need, and you have the friends and the support and the social networks that you need in order to live your life well? It doesn't mean that you're taking these away from somebody else, but the challenge of a philosophy of a zero-sum game where some people have things and other people have not, that is its own problem in this conversation. So these terms get very, very messy, especially in magical contexts, because we tend to apply the dichotomy to people that we don't like. And then we come back around to the thing that I was talking about in the beginning, that somehow whiteness is good and blackness is bad, is inherent in our Western dualistic philosophy of the cosmos, where some side of the equation is good and the other side of the equation is the bad, and we're off to the races. It's what creates all of the supremacist philosophies that plague the world, especially in this internet age. White supremacism, misogyny, nationalism, Christian nationalism, all of the things that say one side is better than the other side. If you really get into magic, you recognize that life exists because of a balance between a creative tension of opposites. And so if you cling to one side versus the other side, you already know you are going down a process that's making life static, less able to grow and develop, and certainly less able to evolve. So when you get into conversation with the people, like, do you practice white magic? Do you practice black magic? That's a heavy subject. And you might find it useful in some concepts to just tell people, I practice white magic, to be done with it, so that they don't, want to ban you from whatever group you're talking about. But understand, this is a really, really deep, complex subject with lots of this and that. And one of the things that you will be learning through the process of doing magic and mastery is understanding what your own personal standards are. And that your standards are based on what you feel aligns you with that deeper spark of the divine within you. Not necessarily what your culture has taught you, what your religion has taught you, what your family has taught you. You may confront a lot of these in the process of learning how to do magic, which ultimately is my sneaking suspicion for why this kind of work has been considered occult, been considered hidden, set to the side, because not everyone in the world is suited to asking those kinds of questions. Not because they can't, but because they don't want to. It's kind of the difference between, that movie The Matrix, which is an allegory for Western philosophy in many ways. Some people are happier taking the blue pill and living their lives and not thinking about any of these kinds of things. Some people want to take the red pill because they cannot help themselves. And you don't have the right to say what other people are going to do. You just have to think about what you are going to do. And living a life where you're constantly questioning why you think the way you do, working toward being conscious 24/7, is not an easy life. That's an awful lot of extra work you're taking on yourself. But those people who want to really, really good at magic and creating their own world, it's a necessary part of the process. Questioning everything, emptying your cup, dumping it out again, and recognizing you don't know anything. And even with years of practice, you will just get more secure in the fact that you don't know as much as you think. And that's okay, because that kind of flexibility is what allows you to shift and change and create the perceptual bubbles that enable you to work with different levels of consciousness. Does that make sense? I know there's a lot of people here. Hello, Christine. Hello, Claudia. Hello, Pat. Hello, Aunt Anna. It's good to see everybody. Christine says North American Native people ceremonies had been banned by the church simply because they assumed we weren't praying to the same God. Yes, they have. And consider that the philosophy in some circles in the United States to not talk about how I hate words like dominant culture, but how the U.S. government, let's just call it that for the moment, has treated Native American citizens over the eons and African American citizens over the eons, and now working into other migrants from other places, is a perfect example of not of wanting to have your reality bubble be really, really small and not open it to other things. But that's one of the brilliant things about the United States, is that it is one place in the world that actually started out as an experiment for what would happen if you were required to live with people different from yourself. How would that change how you think about your life, the universe, and everything? And so, like, once again, it becomes very difficult to have conversations about such things because it's never all good and all bad. It's a conglomeration of people from different points of view struggling and searching and often failing, but sometimes succeeding as we continue to move through our collective human evolution. And recognizing that sometimes we fail and not wanting to look at it, that's a flaw in our ego thinking that it's in charge. And you can't uninstall it. All you can do is teach people how to think more clearly. It's perhaps the best way, which of course some people will take umbrage with, because don't brainwash my children. This devolves quickly into a political conversation, except for the fact that when you are approaching dealing with magic at its core philosophy, you have to deal with these kinds of questions. They can't just be left on the floor, because they are at the heart of what we are doing as we work with deeper abstract principles, shift them in order to manifest what we would like in the world. And someday, our species will get to the point where we recognize these things are true. We're moving in that direction all the time. Our science, our psychology, the fact that we have the internet and people can share ideas in ways they've never been able to share them before. They have good and bad sides, but on the whole, science is recreating what magic has known for a really long time and finding sciencey ways to talk about it. And because of that, because of the pressures of moving toward a more global world, I do believe that's where we're going to end up at the end of the day. May not be in any of our lifetimes, maybe 1,000 years from now, but taking the really long view, that is the direction that we're heading, which is probably why there's so much kicking and screaming and stomping right now. Because things are changing. And when you notice things are changing, you get a little panicky around the edges. Okay, any questions so far? And can I say again, before I go, I am really proud of all of you. If you're listening to this again day after day, and you're making space, just a little bit of space, every day to talk about what magic means in your world and reflect on it, you are starting a process that can eventually change your life. I know when I first got involved in shamanic circles, it certainly wasn't, I never intended to be here. I only started because I'd gotten really sick and I felt like there was no choice, that I had run out of options and holistic medicine was the next best bet. And that just opened floodgates to a lot of other things. And I certainly didn't think I would be sitting here teaching all of you. But of course, that was back in the days before there was a Facebook or an internet. So it's amazing what the future can hold and bring for possibilities. So for homework today, I want you to spend a few minutes, when you're driving the car, doing the dishes, or whatever. How would you define black magic and white magic? Or would you find the terms even useful? Or, even better, what do you define as good and evil? And what kind of impact has that had on your relationship to thinking about magic, or casting spells, or any other thing that feels vaguely forbidden, and why. A lot of fertile ground in there, because sometimes it's our sneaking thoughts about, ooh, that's evil, prevents us from expanding our own reality bubbles. It creates a lot of fear and a lot of shame that is really not necessary, or at least it's not in the appropriate context. So consider those things as we go forward in our journey, because if you don't consider those things now, what happens is when you are learning how to, I don't know, just take something simple, do a prosperity spell for yourself. At best, it's going to fail because you think somehow what you're doing is evil and you don't apply the right kind of energy to it. At worst, it's going to get bent in some way with unforeseen consequences. So these kinds of squishy philosophical conversations might seem silly at first, but they're not. They are going to come up, rear their ugly heads again and again. And I promise you the journey will make you deal with it one way or the other, because that's what the journey is for, after all. It's all about knowing myself and how you and relate to this glorious multiverse that we all live in. Okay? So in this next week, I'm going to be talking a lot about, since we are in Mercury retrograde season, how the different parts of our mind work, because it's the easiest thing for us to learn how to do. Easy, in air quotes. You have to have a working knowledge of the lower parts of your mind before you start trying to work with more complicated stuff on a deeper level. So we're going to talk a lot about that, how you can work with cleaning out your own system, tools and tricks that you can use along the way. We're also going to talk about some of the different kinds of magical techniques and how they fit into a process of creating your own magical practice. So until tomorrow, I look forward to continuing our conversation. Take care, everyone.